Guys, it's Majid from Microsoft. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we are going to create Flask Web App with MySQL and JWT for our front-end template. In this tutorial we will learn more about Flask structure like models, route, and controller, or you can name it repository. Actually, it's not matter. We will learn just simple CRUD operation, and we will work with actually it's interesting, should be interesting tutorial, because we will do more with token, just header token, cookies token, JSON, or queries. In this for different way to create a token and save token. And what's interesting more to create authentication and authorization for login and register user. And now, as you can see, just simple bit integral here. Actually, at the background, you can see, and we are going to create some things like that. And now let's start just from command line. I'm going to create directory, maybe under my from here. Here, Flask Web, for example, and cd Flask Web. From here I'm just going to open my Visual Studio Code, and the next step is to create a virtual environment. Should be sure you have a Python on your system, and then Python 3-m bnb, and I give it the same name, bnb. And now, as you can see, we have created our virtual environment. Now this time is to active that. To do that, just by typing source bnb being active. If you're using Mac, Windows, you should the name of virtual environment is script and then active. Great. Now the second step, of course, need to install Flask. Pip install Flask on our virtual environment. Now, as you can see, it is installed successfully. I update my here pipeline. Okay, great. Now the next step is that I'm going to create a file, a Python file. I name it app.py as a default, and here from Flask import Flask. Okay, now the second step, of course, is to create an instance from Flask class as a default documentation. Actually, structure, I give it the app name and the name of class Flask, and should be name as a constructor. And this, now let me to do something else. I'm going to create an endpoint, or just a simple endpoint by typing app route, and should be here def method home root, or I don't know, sorry. Okay, now let's continue and create a just I'm going to create just endpoint, and from here the method I name it home root or anything that you want, and return, of course, or just return message welcome to Flask. Okay, now the second step is important to run our program, actually to run locally, and I'm going to create the instance from name constructor, and now from here just give a name. And what's important now is to call instance Flask and method run. Okay, now by typing Python app.py, I'm allowed to run the program. And as you can see, welcome to Flask under this endpoint. That means everything looks good, and now we are going to continue. And the next step, actually, before we are creating anything, I'm going to create a structure from Flask from here. Just of course, for our program, we need a database, and then models, of course. And what's important at this time for us, we need routes, and we have actually, and we need some other stuff. Security. This security I'm going to save password hash or token, something like that. I'm using for this purpose. Okay, now before we are starting to create a model for our user, as I said, we want to register user from here, and I'm going to configure our database, and let me to check from here MySQL, and user should be root and password. Okay, now as you can see, I'm connected to MySQL server, or locally actually, and I'm not going to do all things here from command line. I have MySQL word branch as well, and it's local and it's easy to use. But if you prefer to use command line, you can do all the stuff from command line, or just from here, from I don't know, maybe you have another program or software. But now I'm going to close terminal, and it's to be sure you have MySQL on your system. And the next step is to configure our database. Just here I'm going to create actually directly I'm going to create environment file for MySQL. If you want, you can write all the stuff in Python file, or if you want to have maybe clean code, you can create virtual environment. Of course, we need to install some stuff here. Pip install python -env, and as you can see, Python with this version is installed successfully. And what's important we need to pip install, of course, MySQL client, is installed as well. And the second step, or third step from here, is to install Flask SQL Academy, that help us to manage our class instance. From here, install SQL Academy. Okay, now if I do a pip list, you can see all from here, all packages that we are installed until now. Now let's to continue from here. I'm just going to copy paste my database stuff to here, and we have database host, it should be localhost. Database name, actually I will change that. You can from command line create a database, or here from Microsoft branch schemas, create a schema. I give, for example, DB app, or Flask DB app. Now I am typing apply, as you can see is created successfully. Okay, and database name should be Flask DB app, and username root, and this is my password, local password. And as a default, MySQL run on port 330x. If you want to change that, you can change. As not, we don't need to configure that. And now I'm starting from here. We need to create some files to get information actually from the virtual environment. I give a name config.py, for example, and what we need to config just from from that env import just load environment. We need import OS to path to this file, and at the end load.env. That means with call this method should load all variable from here to config file. Okay, now from here just by typing OS get env, and the second step is actually the name. It should be we call or we get a name from here, from virtual environment. Now let me to copy that stuff and just we need to change this name. Okay, great. Now we have host name, username and stuff. Now let's come back actually to app.file. We need to configure some stuff from here, and as you can see we need to init database and initialization some stuff from config file. And what we need to do, and I'm going to config to find SQL database URI, some config file, SQL database URI, MySQL, something like that. I'm not sure, maybe we can find that from here. As you can see, it looks good, but we need to config file. Just maybe SQL Alchemy database URL config file now is better. Okay, great. Now as you can see, this is just documentation file from SQL Alchemy that allow us locally. This is framework that allow us connect to MySQL server or MySQL locally. And as a default, we need this connection string to connect to database. And of course, we need to config this file, SQL Alchemy, from here, database URI. And just to do that, just I'm here, I'm typing config SQL Alchemy, just by typing app config, and now just copy paste and equals these connection strings. Okay, great. Now as you can see, and let me to do that, we have MySQL username. Actually we want to use this because from here we are create this config file, because we wanted to have some clean code, and we don't need to add all the stuff from here to app.database. To do that, I'm going to from here to do something else, create database. For example, I give a name, connection URI, connection string or URI. I use now equals, let me to copy that again from here. Just to config file MySQL, we need username. We have username. Just username and password, database password or user password, and the server in our case is database host is localhost, and DB name should be database name. Okay, great. Now we have database connection URI, and let me from database import config file, and now from here I can say config dot connection URI. That should be connect to create actually should be config these connection strings. And the second step is it's important as well to do that for SQL Academy track modification. I'm going to find that. Actually, as you can see, there are some stuff. It's interesting to know if you want to work, for example, with pool size or timeout. It should be important as well. Actually, you can config, or if you want, you can config this well for any endpoint that the time outside from database and something else. And let me to copy this file. Just should be true. Okay, and the next step is that to, as you can see now, after config file we need like Flask app, we need to create the instance from this config. That means when we create config from SQL Academy, everywhere we can connect to database and do CRUD operation. We can do something like that. DBA equals just let me from Flask SQL Academy import SQL, and I can just do some things like that app, but what's that should be worked correctly, and but what's interesting or what's not interesting, because from model or the root we need to connect to this DB, and everywhere we should call this file app and then connect to database or do a CRUD operations. And I think it's a more clean code when we create this, when we call this DB from other file, for example from config file or anywhere else, instead here from a db.file. Let me to delete that from here, and I want to create the instance from this class, for example here db.pay from Flask Academy import SQL. Okay, now I can say db instance from SQL Academy, and you don't need to pass app here because we have already initialization this class. Okay, now the second, that was instance from SQL, and now what we need else, we need to init or initial database. That means after run this file, this app.py, we must be sure we are allowed to create database. To do that, let me init db For example, I type in db. Now as you can see, we are going to call db, and everywhere when you need a db, you don't need to call app.pay. We can just easily say from database.db import db instance. Now db.init app should be app, and with app context, I'm going to db.create app. Great. And as you can see, we have configured our database file, and looks great actually at this time. Let's continue to create a model class, new file, and just I name user file .pay, and of course we can find some examples here. Actually, model, for example, class model maybe. And as you can see, we have great example here. Import, and we need to change some stuff from here because this connection string is something else. Because we have already created, let me copy paste from here at the first. We don't need this line code because we are get this column and some other stuff from our database. We have already created instance from database, and from here just from database.db import db, and just typing db model, and should be database name. If you want to do that, you are allowed, but you have always different name from class and table name on. But for me it's not actually, I don't like to have some things like this. I prefer to have the same class to same table. I change it to user model, and I don't need this line anymore. ID. Now what we need for registered user, for example, email, password. It's anything important. Maybe we can create a role. Why we need this role? This role help us actually. I don't know, because always we are connect to from where is this mail? Connect to database or connect to website as a user, or sometimes we need super user or admin or something else. We can actually configure this file from here. We can create some other stuff, but db, I don't need this anymore. db and db, we want to use our instance class from our instance database, and db, great, db as well. What's interesting and it's important to know, we need to define length of strings. For example, for email, for password I choose 255 because I'm not sure, because after change password to hash password, I don't know how can we change it itself, and it's better to choose line pass. Actually it's we can define that. You are allowed to choose correct schema that be sure how long your hash pass should be. But now actually I choose this one, and for row maybe 20 just or 10, I don't know, or road. And the next step is to create this is report and return after create a user. I think at this time, let me to create at the first create. Actually, we don't need to do that, but it's better to create constructor from your class. You should have more cleaner code, and it's easy to understand if anywhere call this class. Just by I'm going to create constructor by typing dev init, and we have email, password, of course, and road. And now from here, just by typing self dot email equals email, and now for password as well, for role as well. Okay, now at the end I just want to return what we need to return. We can return all as well, or we can just return maybe I think something like that. I'm not sure. Self.id, yes. Okay, great. Actually looks good. Now the next step is that to create routes. I'm going to create new routes, user.pay, or I don't know, or maybe user route. You can define a name that you want. I think is passed. If it's okay. User route, and of course this user will do an operation, CRUD operation for user. We can create some other routes, for example out, and from here just out dot route.k. Now from here we can create some stuff to connect to database, and some endpoint for register and create token or login as well. Okay, great. Now let's to continue from here. The first actually the first stuff should be endpoint. We're going to create the endpoint to create user, register user. And now before we are starting, as you can see from here, I create instance class. I create the endpoint from app, and always we are allowed to create endpoint from app. And as I have already said for database as well, I don't like to use app anywhere, because for me app is the main route, or is the main file to run program, or just for config, just for init, on something else. From here I'm going to do something else from route out route. I hope you just from Flask, I'm going to import blueprint. What's blueprint? Blueprint actually is the same way to create the endpoint, but with more accessibility, and allow us to create URL prefix. And let us to check from here Blueprint. If I find constructor, as you can see, we are allowed to define a name. This name help us to run or call this class, this endpoint in front end. And you are allowed to define a static folder, a static path, and URL prefix is too important from here. And now let me to start, and I will show you how we can use that. What's important at the first, to create the instance from Blueprint. do that, just I create variable, for example, outrouter equals blueprint. Now it's time for constructor, need a name. For example, I give it out, and of course we need to define a name, and URL prefix should be out as well, for example. That means when we call any endpoint from this file, we need to first call this out and then the name of endpoint. And the first endpoint, as I have already said, should be registered. Just from here, outroute dot route, and I give a name. For example, register name should be, to do that, just I'm typing from here register, and we are going to define a methods, and methods should be post, and do post as well, and sorry, post. And more developer prefer or create method, because this is just post method. If you want, you can create some other stuff, for example, for get, for update, for delete, or something else, but I will not do some things like that. I prefer to create separate endpoint for get and separate endpoint for update or delete or post anywhere, anything actually. Now from here, there create user, and what we need to create from here, just I call this method create user, and the first stuff, actually I have already shown you. You are going to create a token from register token from different way. We will check from headers, cookies, JSON, or query strings. To do that, at the first I'm going to use from header. To do that, we are get information, user information, as you have already said, email, password, role. Actually, wait, role, I forgot to do something else. This role, if you want, you can create the enum class from enum, import enum, or if you don't want to have more complex, because as a default you can define this as user. Okay, to do that, to get information, model information at the first from header example, how does it work? We need to get information actually from get this name data from request dot, okay, we need to add request, of course, request dot get JSON, what we need to get, and I'm going to get email, of course, should be data email, and we have password as well, and role. Okay, now we are allowed to get this information from header, and the second step is to create a instance from user class. That means, because we want to save this information in from this structure, actually from user model, just from models import user or just models dot user import user model class. Now of course looks better. Now let's create new user. How we can create a new user? Just by typing. As you can see here, help us as well. User model, this constructor that we have already created. Now we know the first constructor is email. I type just email equals email, and the second is password. This should be equals to password, and role as a default has a user, but if you want you can change it, for example, to admin or something else. I give user as well, or sorry, just role. Okay, and now we have an instance class. It's time to save this instance class in database. To do that, just I'm going to from here to do that db. We need database, just again from database.db import db db dot session dot add new user db dot session again dot commit and force. No, all this stuff we can try to do that. Okay, and accept return some error. Okay, now we have endpoint, register endpoint, of course, not forgot. Post model from header, we want to test that, and we're going to save some information in our database. Okay, now let me to run program again and be sure everything is okay. Okay, now MySQL, as you can see we have some error. Onion MySQL server host data warehouse, and let me check that from what's database host, should be localhost. From here we have localhost as well. Okay, I cannot find some above was operation. No wrap, because as I know we are creating instance. Okay, actually what I did to forgot, because from here I create this blueprint instance, but I forgot to register this blueprint because we didn't want to configure all this stuff in app.py. It's important when we create for this file. Actually, maybe they coming more endpoint here. It's important to modify or register this command line in app.py. To do that, we need to actually from here just to do that, maybe from here, and I'm going to say app.register blueprint, and the name of router That means I need to from here from here from routes dot out routes import out router. Now I can just register this out route, and we have already config SQL as I can see. Now let me to run this program again. On in your MySQL database host background, let me to check pip list. We have now I can see MySQL from here. We have Flask SQL Alchemy as well. Actually looks everything great, but why Onion MySQL server host database host localhost? Okay, now sometimes it's wrong. Let me to close that and run. Not here. Cd Flask Web. Okay, now let me to do again. Okay, from terminal just Python app.py. As well we have the same error, MySQL operation error, SQL Alchemy. That means we have here as well, as you know. Here should be correct as well. And we have config file. And here as well. And what's wrong here? MySQL server host, database host. Let me to do debug to true. I'm interesting to know database host, username, user. Okay, interesting. Now it's worked. Okay, great. Let's to check that, because I think I lost that. I delete that. Just again, app dot route default div home again. Oh, sorry. Div home return welcome to Flask. Should be route. I'm not sure about that, because let me to kill this terminal. And sometimes actually this such problem you cannot see with Django or Fast API, but here you need sometimes to close and open. I don't know, do some stuff that it's not matter. And let me to do that. App.py without debugs, fine. Okay, it's not find that. And what's wrong here again? Okay, it's not matter because let me at the first check this our routes from here, this register routes. I'm going to open Postman, and now from here just copy this file, this command line, and then come this prefix out, and then come this name of endpoint should be register, and from body raw JSON, of course. Now we have email equals now email at email.com. Yeah, the company password should be password as well. And what we need to define maybe role as a default as user, but we can be sure we have user here. Now let me to post request. Okay, now enable request, the server response, the out that create user didn't return a valid response. This of course because I forgot to here return a value. After that I'm going to return create user successfully. Now we are again okay, create user successfully. Let me to open my database. From here that was Flask AppDB from database. As you can see, it's not here. What was the name of database? In the Flask DB app. Flask DB app. Flask DB app, sorry, from here. No. Okay, great. Now as you can see, we have two users. We create two users because the first time we get an error, I forgot to return a value for endpoint, and now as you can see it's created by MySQL workbench. Workbench, you can see all the stuff, and we have two problems here. As you can see, if I call this endpoint anymore, and that's problem is here actually, and that at the first we have duplicate email in database and should not do. We don't want to have something like that. And password, you can see password in database, and we need to hash password. At the first, let me to configure this because we don't want to have a duplicate email. To do that, just we can check. For example, user exists equals user model dot query, some things like that. We can check by query, for example, and filter by email that is coming from here. to email from database. Actually, we can check that, and at the end we are return actually the first column. And as you can see, we are create a query from filter. As you query filter by email, first user exists. Now we can say if not users exist, when this user is not found, then try to do that, create new user. Okay, now we're trying again. Okay, sorry, I returned that. Should not return from here. Of course, from here. And let me create the else. Return user email or pass is not correct. Okay, now as you can see, email or pass is not correct because this email has already exists and we cannot have a duplicate email. I change it to email at email 2, for example. Create a user successfully. Now let's me to check all the stuff. As you can see, email 2 is added successfully. If I try again, email or password is not correct. Okay, great. And the second stuff is to hash password. To do that, we need to install some package and we need to configure our file. I'm going to, from here, security, create a new file. For example, security just echo or just echo pass. Don't pay. I'm going to use passlib. You can of course find passlib. Passlib pay. And I'm sure you can find documentation and more about this passlib. And it's pretty easy and pretty easy to use, and I can actually, as you can see, this passlib documentation and show you how you can config passlib, how you can define some different schema. As you can see, create a hash pass with different schemas, and of course should be getting a start, API reference, and some other stuff. Now let's do from here passlib dot context import crypto context. Passlib point context could not be resolved. Of course, we need to hit install passlib. Okay, now we need to create a class, create an instance from this class, crypt context. To do that, just easy create. Let me to copy that in this stuff. Okay, here equals crypt context. As you can see, the first constructor ask for schemas. You can find more schemas here from documentation if you want to. Actually, that's just the algorithm, this schema. How would you like to hash your pass as a number and alphabet, or I don't know, some other stuff, how long you should be, and everything's. And you must be sure you choose correct schemes because your model allowed to have 255 55 here, and it's important you choose correct schemas. And from here, schemas for our example, I choose, for example, this script, and what I need else, just from here, just the bread should be, of course, auto. And why we have some error? Okay, now great. And now we need two methods, two simple methods. Just one method for create hash pass, and this second method for verify pass. Just by typing def, for example, get password hash. Parameter should be password. It's coming one password, and just we need to return crypt context that hash password for us, just password. Just pretty easy. And second method to verify password. Just we need to check, compare two passwords together. One password is coming from header JSON cookies, and the second is the password that have already saved in database. To do that, just for example, plain password, and the second should be hashed password. And what we need to return crypt context dot verify plain pass and hashed pass. Okay, great. Now let me come back to here. Before we are going to save password, we want to hash password from security dot from security. Just let me import security pass, and here security pass dot get password hash, just password. Now let me to run this program again, and if I add new user 3 for example, create successfully. Now come back here, return. Okay, great, we have hash password and it looks great. And as you can see, if you want to have a long pass or some other stuff, you just need to change a schema or algorithm schema to create hash pass. And I think it's great. Now the next step is to create a login or login user. To do that, actually, or I just wanted to show you from here, and now at the same way we need just copy paste from here, and just let me to check again. We need to create a token. I name it login, create user, and create token, or you can change that to any name that you want. You can change it to token or login. I name it login. And again, post method, I get this both username and password from header as well. and of course we need to check if user exists, if not exist, if not user exists, or pass secure pass dot verify password wasn't the same as a password that is coming from header, and the password that is have already saved in database user exists password. If not, then just return just email or password is not correct, and then we can add that. And what's important actually is completely depend to you. As you can see, we are allowed to config more. Let me to do complete here, because at the first I checked this not okay now. And you can check actually more stuff from here. For example, if you say yes, I want to check if user exists, if user, I don't know, it's completely depend to you. How would you like to recognize or authorization your user from here? And let me to format my code. Okay, as you can see here, we need to install autopip 8 to actually help us to format the code. Okay, great. Okay, now is the time to configure our token. For token, we don't need that this time. We are going to create actually Flask JWT extend pi. Okay, at the first we need to install this JWT token file, and let's come back. Actually, it's perfect and really great, has a great documentation, and you can just easy to understand everything from here. Just create token, maybe create token, basic usage. As you can see, we need to config secret key, we need to create the instance from JWT manager as well, and then from after login, just we need this just 2 command line to create a user, to create command line. And let's get start. First I'm going to copy these lines from here, and the second is that from here we need of course just JWT manager, because we need to create the instance as well. From here just I'm here now just here we can create JWT manager here of course, and can be here as well. We are going to change that our security key, and as I see we need that here as well, because we are going to as well, like Flask SQL Alchemy on JWT manager. We are going to configure our file here at the first initialization, and then we can call JWT anywhere that we want. And the second step is that to create token. After be sure user exists and the password is passed, is the type correct password, and now we can just JSON file come from here, JSON init is coming from there, and we are going to create a token from email. That means in this token we can find this email as well when we need to verify token. And of course here cannot create token. Maybe we need to just, because we get error, and I'm prefer to have that from here, access token from here. Okay, great. Now let's just start just by running our app. AirPlay receiver, service receiver performance sharing. Okay, what is that? AirPlay receiver. Okay, sharing portal is in use by another program, but which program? Okay, now it's worked. I don't know why. Okay, great. Now let me do copy this line, of course, body again, raw and JSON. We are going to login user, again post, and from here should be login. Create a request, URL was not found. URL not found. I'm going to be sure login and out login method post and JSON, and cannot find out. Spring out, just login again. Now the method is post to this endpoint. Maybe let me test another endpoint, because I get an error to run a program. Okay, email or password is not correct. So now it looks better. I'm sure this user should be exist in database. Email password is not correct, is exist. And now just we are going to say if not email and address, do that, else try to create the access point from here. That means access point identity from email. Okay, actually looks good. Now again, post request to logging, email password, and let me to do something else. And from here, back. Email password is not correct. Let me to create new user 4. Okay, create user successfully. And now 4 again, email password is not correct because we take a password from here and we are going or not, of course. Security password, passcode. Okay, again run this program. Okay, great. Now this time is working because I forgot to do something like not if not user, and if I don't use not, that means the username and password must be actually different to run this program. Okay, great. Now it's run. That means that was better. Something like that I wanted to have. Okay, great. As you can see, we have an access token, and we could great example to get a token, and we can do something else. As you can see, if you use JWT to require protect this endpoint, if you want to protect any endpoint and have access to this endpoint with token, you can do something like that. And all that you need to write JWT require, and from here just we can let me to access this protect file by typing just get out protected. If I try to access this page, this protected, sorry, you are not found again. Of course, I don't know what's happened here, but I'm going to copy this stuff from here, this new command line. Okay, now is I'm trying access to this endpoint with JWT required file, and what's wrong here? 500. It looks good. Again, login and get method. Okay, as you can see, message missing authorization. That means I don't allow access to this endpoint without authentication. We have already gotten this token. I just want to copy this token from here, and from authorization I choose bearer token. I delete all token and new token. Okay, as you can see, I'm logged as email4.com. Why I return this email? Because I have already created token from email identity. Identity is from email, and now from get JWT identity I return email. This identity is referred to this identity, and now as you can see, or if you want to, for example, why we need these roles and where we need to use this role. From here we have role. You can actually just test that as well. You can choose identity as role, and you can allow to authorization some endpoint just from current user dot role is user, or dot admin dot role is equals to admin, allow to access any endpoint. And that was actually the scenes of create this role. From identity we can check who allowed to access this endpoint, user or admin. Okay, great. Actually we have everything from here. The next step is to use cookies. Create a token for cookies. Actually for our purpose, from here JSON and headers we have created, and cookies actually for our website. From here we need these cookies to save token on user browser. Okay, great. Now let's start to create access token. Okay, I'm going to here, and as you can see, create token, type in cookie, set access cookies. Now let me to open that, and now as well as you can see, we need to configure some files from here. JWT cookies, CRFT protect, and JWT secret key we have already. For JSON and header cookies token, we have config this. Let me to copy just one here. You can define a location, and just here define a location for our cookies. And what's important to know, you can use actually from here you can save cookie in header, cookies, JSON and query strings. That means the location JWT token location can be here as well, and header as well. You can save anywhere that you want. Not anywhere, actually there are four different ways. And now as you can see, we are going to JWT to access cookie path. We are going to define a path, and what we need else, cookie secure. It's not bad that we use this cookies CRF protect. As you can see, as a default is this disable CRF protect, for example, is almost case protected cookies, but and let me to check. Actually as you can see, if you in this CSRF protect to F has a true value, that means we are allowed to have a double protection for our cookies, and that means we get second token for this CSRF. Let me to add it as well. And what we need else? Maybe I think it's enough. We have the location, we have path and CRSF, and I think it's enough actually. And the second step, and from here as you can see, because I have already from here JWT, I create the instance and initialize that program. I don't need to do that, and let me do copy this JWT security from here as well. JWT is secure. I pass it to false, and now looks better. Okay, great. Now let's come back from here. Inside route, we don't need to here I create the access token as well, and after that, after create access token, we can do some things like that. We are going to set token. From here, set access cookies. Maybe I need to add it from here. Okay, and as you can see, from here, after create token, we are allowed to return token as well, something like that. And or after create token, we are allowed to save this token where here in token location. Location should be cookies at the first, and this token path should be API path. This path is working like endpoint. It's important to know. And after that, we are going to return this user. Now I think it's good, and if we are going to use cookies, we don't need something like that. And before that, before starting with create cookies, before starting with create our application from here, some website, we need to configure template and a static file. I don't want to create the write CSS, HTML, bootstrap code here at this time. I just want to copy paste my template to here. To do that, I'm going just to do some things like that. I have this template in my system, and let me to check where can I find that. Okay, static file, and of course template and Flask Web. Now as you can see, we need two different files. Static, for a static file, some things like bootstrap, font, awesome, some custom image or custom CSS or custom here as you can see is custom CSS you are allowed to create, or custom JS as well. And the second is template. This template should be our website, and as you can see, we have base HTML from Jinja template. I've already import navbar, some things like that, and footer, and inside this content block you are write your other stuff. And under out we have login, register. For page, dashboard, index, contacts, and actually that's in this user dashboard should be actually our secret website. Now let me to close that, and you can download this file, or you can allow to write HTML template for yourself. And before we continue, actually, as you can see from here, I have just post method to this path login and okay, now let me one to one. It's better from here, starting just from template out register. I get a name, email, password, submit. Just email and password. To do that, just this time I'm not getting information from JSON file. I delete that, and I say I want to get this information from form, and should be from here, request.form. Now should be email, and of course password as well. This time not from header and JSON, just from password, from sorry, from form. And role, we don't need to add it because we have created as a default as a user. And now create user successfully, and for login again I can just copy that from here to here. For logging, we get this times information from website, web form, and you must be sure you get this name from here, and name should be correct, like here, email and password, and they coming here, email and password. Okay, and as you can see, we have at this time just post method, and we are not allowed to open this website. To do that, we need to write two different methods to get these two template to these two endpoint. Just let me, for example, from here to do that, just authrouter dot route, for example, the same, actually it's the same way from here, just this time get, and now def get, for example, register method, or you can change the name what you want actually, and then return render template, render template, of course, from here, Flask render template. Okay, what we need to render, and we are going, when we are called this endpoint register, we are going to have access to out folder and then register.html file. That means out register.html file, and it's pretty easy, just copy paste for login as well. This time get login to login.html. Okay, great. And what we need else now, as you can see, I have already created this page, this user page, this dashboard page. Under user, we can create an endpoint. Actually, we have already learned to make endpoint secret, or we know how we can secrete endpoint on with authorization and authentication. I can just copy this code to this file from user, and because we want to create dashboard and we want to be sure not anybody access to this page without authentication. And of course this is new file like out, we need to define some things like that, because this is new file and need new endpoint. And from Flask import blueprint, and this time user, and should be user router, and JSON file as well. And let me to copy these two line codes as well. JWT required what we need, and get JWT identity. Okay, great. Now what's important, when get user info, when user is identified, we want to render user and render template. Okay, return render template, where we want to return user. When anyone call this endpoint, should be returned to dashboard from here. And now just dashboard copy path without template, something like that. And if you want, you can return this information as well. User info. Okay, should be user info. And actually looks good. We are not doing anything else, as we have just created endpoint that this endpoint need JWT required authentication and authorization, of course, and without authentication and authorization don't allow to have access to this page. And the second file, like user, for user path, we have another page for contact, dashboard, and index file. I create new page, just pages route dot pay, and let me again something like that. I copy this from here to here. This time should be page as well, and here page router. Okay, and what we need, of course we need that as well. And from here page router without any required authorization required, we want to get index. I name it this method index, and render this time index.file. I will copy this path to here, and we don't need to return anything here. I delete that page index, and the same way, but should be sure here we want to call index from this just after port. That should be a home, our home page, this index file. And I'm just going to without actually any endpoint, and I don't need this prefix as well, because without any prefix I just want to call this endpoint, and this endpoint refer to index.file. And the second is contact, and return to this contact file page contact.html. And what we need to do, of course, because we are create two router and like out router, we need to add it out dot page router and user route to user router. Sorry. And now I think we have everything. We can check our program from here. Thus I'm going to create new, come here, terminal, and typing Python. What do I need to type? Python app.pay. Okay, I did that. I forgot to const equals 0, 0, 0, 0. Now let me to open. My file is, I have some error until now, and another. Okay, here is working, and I'm not sure, and I don't know what's happened here with AirPlay from Mac. Now, as I said, you can see we have we have our template here that we have already created two different ways, just simple template. We have login. If I try to access this dashboard, should be I can actually render template user without token, without authorization to login file. It's not problem. Just render file to login. But if I do login, let me create user account at the first. For example, email at email 4 or 5 at gmail.com, because I forgot to manage this email, but I check actually from front that the correct structure from for email has, but you can just check from your backend. You can write code that for, I don't know, for email structure, and password 1, 2, 3, of course. Should be 1. Okay, sign up. As you can see, your account created successfully. Let's come back to here. As you can see, email at email4.com is created successfully, and now I'm going to sign in with email at email4.com with password 1, 2, 3. What's 97? They're not unable to complete your request. Maybe let me to create my now, and from here let me to copy this email and log in again. 1, 2, 3. Okay, we have some error here. The internal error, unable to run. Maybe just stop it from here and verify the secure password, verify password, user password. not email password. Because as I know we are create. What's wrong here? Let me come back actually to create account, and this time you give an account name, for example media@gmail.com, or just this, sign up. Email password is not correct because I have already created maybe, and let me to check test@test.com and password 123. Okay, your account created successfully, and now test 123. Okay, great, and now it's connected successfully. Because I get a problem, I get an error because I try to log in, maybe I try to type not correct email from here. Now if at this time if I try to access to dashboard file, as you can see is secret, and this secret file is referred to, when I come back here, should be here from route user, create secret file from dash JWT required secret file, and need authentication and authorization to access this file. Okay, great. Now I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and actually, as I said, we are create more different token, and we are create beautiful website with using Flask. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and bye.